So yeah, it's starting to calm down now. I can hear it smattering on my rain hood quite a bit more, and you can see it on the water, like it's really coming down now. So I am spending a little bit of extra time here during my break, just charging up some batteries, my smartwatch, which I'm using for tracking the GPS and such. I'm kind of using the kayak as cover from the rain there. So yeah, I've made it basically halfway so far, about 11 kilometers of 22. I think a lot of the rest of the way is going to be rainy, so I'm glad I brought this rain jacket, or basically paddle jacket. You don't really need to have great weather to have a great time, and the ambience of the rain falling, the sound and the feel of the cool air and such. And I think that's what's going to happen during the rest of my paddling trip here. All right, now it is still raining after the break, and based on the weather forecast I saw before, I've been kind of aware of that it's quite possible that the full remainder of the paddle will be in rain, which I don't mind. As I said, I have dry pants and I'm geared up for rainy conditions. I'm not suffering from the rain, and actually I do enjoy some variation. So yeah, it's starting to calm down now, like it's really coming down now. So yeah, as I usually say during my trips, be prepared for conditions to change. A paddling trip that might be warm at first and sunny at first could change, and it could become a lot cooler like it did now, and a lot cloudier like it did now, and a lot rainier, or whatever it is, windier or whatnot, like it did now. So always be prepared. Check the weather forecast, and if you're paddling for longer stretches, be prepared for that the weather forecast might not always be right. In this case, I knew about this from the weather forecasts for both locations. I'm gonna paddle today, initially at least, and if I hadn't even checked the forecast, it was still pretty obvious from the clouds that eventually there was going to be rain. But anyway, always bring those spare clothes in a dry bag, and if you're paddling for a bit longer, like I'm doing here, a full day or more than one day, then of course you want to be prepared for weather shifts. So be ready for rain, for example, and again that it might get colder. So I've been in a t-shirt the first half of my trip, and that was almost too warm. But now I would be miserable if I didn't have my gear. So always something to take into account, and remember, pack properly, be prepared, and check that weather forecast. Another thing to take into account is if you're using your phone, even if it's in a waterproof cover, using it anywhere near horizontally will have, of course, in raindrops come down, and sometimes the phone interprets it as pushing on the pressing on the phone, and does all kind of crazy things, or you might simply not see what you are doing. So in order to make your phone kind of work, you'd have to tilt it like this and look at it so that the raindrops basically don't fall directly on the screen. But even so, it can be a bit tricky in rain to use your phone if you're using that for navigation, as I'm doing today, because this is an easy system. And I'm just keeping an eye on the different openings and the distances and whatever. But if you are reliant on your phone in rain, that could be a problem. A waterproof map and a compass is, of course, superior. But the other thing is, when it's rainy, like now, and cloudy, the visibility goes down quite a bit. So over there, it's a bit more blurry on the horizon, and that's something to be aware of as well. If it were to get a bit foggy, as it almost is over there, your navigation gets trickier as well, because it might not be as easy to see distinct features in the landscape, or openings between islands or whatever. So that's something to be aware of and keep in mind. Overall, in rain, I mean, you don't need a fancy paddle jacket necessarily. You could use any rainproof jacket that works in heavy rain and that is comfortable enough to paddle. So if you have something like that, by all means, but you should try it out, so that, for example, where the jacket ends, you don't want to have kind of a mismatch, so that you get wet and cold around the waist or wherever. In all cases, paddle jackets are made both for the mobility and different level of waterproofing, of course. Whether it's a splash jacket that mainly keeps water from splashing on you, or from waves, or your paddle, or from rain, or whether it's a dry top that's there to also protect you if you end up in the water, together with dry pads. There's always the risk that you might get some water in the middle, as opposed to a full dry suit, but it should at least minimize that. And in all cases, those jackets, for example a paddle jacket like this one, it costs a bit, but so does a good outdoors rain jacket, I suppose. But anyway, if you have good gear, why not use it? Just make sure that you have different layers for different temperature changes during the day, and something to keep the rain out of your eyes. In this case, my paddle jacket has this hood here and a kind of cap. Otherwise, I have the cap with me. I sometimes use a sou'wester rain hat as well, which works really nicely. I didn't bring that today because I have the cap plus this, and it's quite fine. but that's something I use sometimes, and it can give you a wider area of protection against the raindrops. The hood here kind of restrains my vision slightly more than a sou'wester hat would, so that's something as well. And then of course your footwear. In this case I'm wearing dry pants with socks, with dry socks, meaning that I'm just having some paddle shoes over them, and even if I get water in my shoes, as I did now when I stepped onto shore, that's not really an issue, because I mean I'm not getting any water into my dry pants, so I don't really care, which is an advantage, which is why sometimes even in summer I use my dry pants like this, especially if it might rain, or if I'm in an open kayak like this where I get a lot of paddle splash, and they were plenty splashed even before the rain started, so that's a good thing. But if you don't have those anyway, pick your paddling shoes so that they work well with water, neoprene or whatever they might be, and then ultimately again the spare change of clothes for when you get out of the rain and you're cold maybe and tired after your paddling trip, and you really want to get out of those wet paddling clothes and get into something nice and dry. Or if you end up somehow wet because of the rain or whatever, soaked through, maybe your jacket wasn't as waterproof as you thought it might be. Happened to a friend of mine, unfortunately. She got a very severe cold after that. But having proper gear, then a weather like this isn't really a problem. And this is nothing heavy. Another thing is to check your hood for how much you can adjust it for, basically pulling it together and such. This one isn't very intuitive in that regard. If I had heavy wind blowing against me, then basically I would have this flapping around, and I would prefer to have a cap under it. The rain hood, meaning the rain hood, even though the jacket works just fine. Another thing, if it's cold in the air or in the water, as opposed to now when the water is quite nice actually in temperature, and it's still reasonably warm out. I'm not cold, but it's chilly in the air compared to what it was before. Anyway, your hands can get cold as well, so you might consider having paddling gloves of some sort. Sometimes in summer I use partial gloves, meaning they don't cover the fingers, or most of the fingers, mainly the center part of the hands, and they also sometimes give you a better grip on your paddle. You still want to try that out, because some people feel that some gloves do the opposite. You get less hold on the paddle, so you want to try that. But basically you can get less friction against the paddle. So if you're paddling for a long time and you have issues with getting blisters on your fingers or the soles of your hands after, then maybe paddling gloves, more basic paddling gloves, or something like bike gloves, sometimes with partial fingers as well. could be a good thing. So that's it. And again, remember that in rain, hearing is impaired because you have all of the sound of the rain, and visibility is lowered. So you want to consider as well how visible you are to other crafts on the water, which might be a lot less. I, on the other hand, right now am in a bright yellow kayak and orange paddling clothes. I should be as visible as I possibly can on the water right now without having a flag or even some sort of lights on. So anyway, that's something to consider. A lot to think about when it gets rainy or the weather gets a bit rough. All right, I am making good time, and the paddle continues. This stretch of the trip is mainly just lake paddling, so just covering distance really, although there's nice nature around. Speaking further on the topic of rain gear, as I mentioned just before there, well, the rain has calmed down a little bit here now, but it could just as well have gotten worse, and it could be colder than it is now. So one aspect to take into account is that while a paddle jacket or a rain jacket or whatever you're using is great, again, as I mentioned before, it's important with the layers. So if it were noticeably colder than it is now, for example, then even though the rain jacket or the paddle jacket protects me from the rain, it's obviously wet, and as it's wet on the outside, it will still not be all that warm towards, if that's the only thing I have, towards the skin, for example on my arms. So if you do foresee that it's gonna get chillier, now I'm quite fine, but again, if it were chillier, I would have to add one of the layers that I have with me in a dry bag. And the thing is, if it's just pouring down and it's really heavy rain, then of course what's going to happen if you have to stop, maybe on the water even, pull your PFD off, pull your paddle jacket off, put an extra layer of clothing on, and then put your jacket back on, and then your PFD on. First of all, it's not great if you have to do that on the water. It's okay maybe in a stable craft like this, but a lot more difficult in a less stable kayak. But if you can't get to cover under trees or whatever, obviously there's a noticeable risk that your extra layer and maybe part of your paddle jacket is gonna get quite wet by the time you get it on, even if you're quick about it. So in that case, it might be better to plan ahead and add an extra layer of clothing when you put your paddle jacket on in the first place, even if it's a little bit warmer than you would prefer, if you foresee that it could get chilly. In this case, I have the weather forecast and it's summer here, and while it gets cold some days, this is not one of those days really. It gets chillier certainly, but not that chilly. The temperatures are not that low, and I don't see that they are likely to get that low during the time I paddle here. So I have really just my t-shirt on and the paddle jacket. And I'm not cold, but as I mentioned, I can kind of feel that the wet outside of the jacket doesn't exactly bring a ton of warmth to my arms there. even if it does protect to some degree. In that way, it's like a dry suit. For example, it keeps you protected from the water and wind to an extent, but it doesn't provide warmth in itself. Of course, the jacket does that more so, maybe, but still, it's the same principle. If it gets colder, remember that extra layer, and maybe take the time to put it on while it is not raining that much. You don't want to be doing that in a full rainstorm. Just like you don't want to be packing down your tent or setting up your tent when it's raining bizarrely. Sometimes you simply have to, and then you deal with it. But if you can somehow plan to avoid it, it's a lot easier. So that about rain. Now the rain is actually calming down substantially. It's there are still raindrops coming down, but it's not a ton of rain as such. So a lot more relaxed. Let's see if that keeps up until I'm done. I still have another, for this stretch, let's see, it's about 8 kilometers maybe. So it's gonna take me the better part of 2 hours, probably 2 hours actually, because I have to carry at least once past the power station. So yeah, let's see how that turns out.